The Opportunity, Part 4. When she had finished the speech, she relaxed, as if reading it had taken something out of her. She looked toward the dark. From there, she heard excited whispering in which the words wonderful, wonderful were repeated. Then she saw Gloria beckoning to her wildly from the wings, and she walked off the set. They love you, Gloria said. They love you. You've got the part. They want to see you in the office. Backstage was empty, Elise noticed. All the others had gone. Miss Hagel led her up some back stairs to an office, and Mr. Belber, Mr. Traveler, and Mr. Leary came in. The three men seemed to her kind, witty, and rich. Their conservative clothes, their gray hair, and the heavy framed glasses they all wore made her think of the directors of a trust company. When the introductions were finished, they told her they wanted her for the part and would give her a copy of the play to read that night. Rehearsals would begin in 3 days. They would discuss the contract with Miss Hagel in the morning and sign it at noon. Miss Hagel would have to get Elise an equity card and see about entering her in the professional children's school. They agreed to meet at noon, and Elise and Miss Hagel left and got a taxi. I'm not going to sign a run of the play contract, Miss Hagel said as they drove across town. I'm only going to let them have you for a year. Then I'll take you out to the coast for 2 years. Then back to Broadway for another play. Then back to the coast. Then back here for a musical. Can you sing? Can you dance? Not much, Elise said. Well, you can learn, Gloria said. Back here for a musical with a television show on the side, and then back to the coast again, and you won't even be 23 years old. She began to talk about hundreds and thousands of dollars, and absorbed in these calculations, she said goodbye to Elise absent-mindedly. Elise walked home. It was after 6, and Miss Wilson was waiting. I think I've got it, Ma, Elise said. Miss Hagel's going to ask for 500 a week, but she doesn't think I'll get more than 350. They gave me a copy of the play. I've got to read it tonight. Mrs. Wilson sat down. If the poor woman had ever allowed herself to expect anything, the shock might not have been so great. But because she had contented herself with the thought of a hard life, the prospects of Broadway and Hollywood staggered her. Elise got her mother a glass of water and sat on the arm of her chair until she had recovered. Well, I thought we might go out tonight and have dinner in a restaurant for a celebration, Mrs. Wilson said. But if you have to read the play tonight, I guess we'd better put off our celebration. I suppose there will be a lot of work to it, as well as money and excitement. Mrs. Wilson cooked the dinner, and when they had finished and washed the dishes, Elise went into her room to read the play, and Mrs. Wilson sat down with some sewing. She was intensely excited, but she was proud of the composure they were both showing. If anyone should look into their apartment, they would not know that night was unlike any other. It was hot. All the familiar sounds of the neighborhood on a late summer night came through the open windows. From the other room she could hear Elise turning the pages of the play. She had been sewing, and the girl had been reading for about 3 hours, when she heard Elise get up from her desk and come to the door. She looked up and saw that Elise had been crying. Is it a sad play, dear? Mrs. Wilson asked. No. Elise ran to her mother, knelt on the floor beside her chair, and put her face in her mother's lap. She began to cry again. But what's the matter, dear? Mrs. Wilson asked. Tell me what's the matter. It stinks, Elise said. What do you mean, dear? I mean the play stinks, Elise cried. She lifted her swollen face and looked at her mother. I can't be in it. I just can't be in it, Mother. I wouldn't be in such an awful play. I don't care how much they paid me. It's worse than any movie I ever saw. It's even worse than the comic books. It stinks. She put her face in her mother's lap and sobbed for a while. Then she lifted her head again. You see, it's about this old actress who lives in a big country house in the fashionable part of Maryland, she said. That's what it says right in the play, in the fashionable part of Maryland. Well, I'm her stepdaughter, and she wants me to marry a rich man named Ricky, and I want to marry a farmer named Joel. And in the end, it turns out that Joel was rich all the time. She sobbed a little at the thought of this, then went on. On top of this, there's this zany family living in the house, the same zany family that they've had in every play and movie since the flood. There's a crazy old man in the cellar who thinks he's making atomic bombs, and a punchy prize fighter who thinks he's Thomas Edison, and there's an Englishman with a monocle and a cane that explodes, and a parrot that talks with a French accent, and in one scene I have to come out of a grandfather clock making noises like a cuckoo. Well, as you describe it, it doesn't sound very good, I'll admit, Mrs. Wilson said judiciously.